Good evening and thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're learning more about the death of an 18-year-old Tyler woman whose body was found yesterday in a wooded area behind the Hollytree Apartments near West Grande Boulevard. Tonight, 19-year-old Jamaria Britton is in the Smith County Jail accused of murdering Deja Hood. Tyler police say he was the last person Deja was seen with before being found dead. Tonight, KLTV7's JD Conti has more on what Britton is telling authorities about the moments leading up to Hood's death.
On Monday night, just after midnight, Lakita Jordan, the mother of 18-year-old Deja Hood, reported her missing. According to an arrest affidavit, Jordan said her daughter may be with Jamaria Britton. In police custody, the affidavit states he later admitted to Hood's murder. Britton was soon contacted by police, where he said that on Monday he picked up Hood and a 1-year-old child that she was caring for and brought him to the Hollytree Apartments, where he is a resident. An altercation began after Britton said he returned to the apartment to find the child under the stairwell. Britton said his, quote, fit of rage started after he said Hood tugged on his ear, which he says reminded him of what his ex-girlfriend would do. He began to beat Hood with an object and strangled her. A neighbor soon knocked on the apartment door to ask if everything was okay. After responding, Britton drove the child back to Hood's mother's apartment. When he returned, he discovered Hood was still alive and stabbed her. According to the affidavit, Hood was spooked by a neighbor while disposing of the body and therefore tossed her into a ravine. Police found latex gloves and footprints near a fence that blocks the ravine, as well as gloves and mud near Britton's car. JD Conti, KLTV 7 News.
And tonight, Jamaria Britton is being held in the Smith County Jail with bond set at $1 million.